welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going deep on something that, really shapes how we see the world. Oversimplification.
Yeah.
We all do it.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to be looking at a conversation between Mike, just some guy,
Okay.
and this really insightful AI that gets into, why we crave easy answers.
Yeah.
And you know what? The problems that come with that, our listeners, they want to understand the why behind things.
Absolutely.
And I think there are going to be some serious aha moments.
For sure. This AI, it just jumps right in, no time wasted.
Right to it.
Straight to how humans crave simple explanation. It's almost like built into us.
Yeah. It makes sense, though. The world is a complicated place.
It is.
It's a lot easier to just grab onto an easy explanation, even if it's not, the whole truth.
Right.
But I guess, why is that? Why are we so drawn to simplicity, even when it, leads us in the wrong direction?
It's a survival mechanism. Back in the day when our brains were evolving, making a quick judgment,
Oh, yeah.
is that rustling in the bushes? Friend or foe?
Saber-toothed tiger situation.
Exactly, life or death. But nowadays, you're right, not too many saber-toothed tigers roaming around.
Not so much.
So that instinct to simplify can really backfire.
Especially in today's world.
Yeah.
So how's this craving for simple answers playing out in, the actual issues that we all face?
Well, Mike, in the conversation, he brings up mental health.
Okay.
And, how often it gets boiled down to, it's just your genes.
Yeah.
Or you're just weak.
Just snap out of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Yeah, and it's like we forget people are complex.
Right. They have so many experiences that shape them in ways that we don't always see.
Exactly. And this AI, so smart, lays it out.
Okay.
3 key factors we miss when we talk about mental health. First, biological genes are part of it.
Right.
But also environmental triggers.
Oh, I see.
So things like trauma,
Right.
childhood trauma, chronic stress, just constantly being stressed, exposure to violence, these can have a massive impact on someone's mental well-being.
Yeah.
Even if they don't have, say, a family history of it.
That's a good reminder that even if, mental health challenges run in your family,
Right.
it doesn't mean, you're destined for them.
Not at all. And then that leads us to, what we do as a society, social stigma, the way we talk about mental health.
Yeah.
It has a huge impact. So the AI asks us, how do we react when someone is struggling?
Right.
Do we shut them out,
Mhm.
making them feel like they have to hide it?
Yeah.
Or do we judge, like it's their fault?
Yeah, that makes it so much worse. It's like we're punishing people for something that's already incredibly hard.
Exactly. And the AI makes this point, it makes it worse. Isolating people with mental health struggles
Wow.
actually exacerbates their condition.
So the opposite of what we should be doing.
Right. So instead of pushing them away, how about we support them? Create a space where they feel safe to talk about their struggle.
That's huge.
Yeah. And then the third factor, access to care. It's great if someone knows they need help, but can they get it? The cost of therapy, finding a therapist, even just navigating the mental health system.
That's a nightmare sometimes.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like we say go get help, but then we put all these roadblocks up.
It's like a system designed to make people fail.
Exactly.
You're told to get help, but then you run into all these barriers that make it almost impossible.
Right. It shows how oversimplifying mental health, just willpower or just genetics, misses the point completely.
Yeah, totally.
And guess what? This oversimplification, it doesn't stop there. Mike goes on to talk about homelessness.
Oh, homelessness. Another one where people jump to conclusions.
Oh, yeah.
They're lazy. They did something wrong.
Like Mike says, it's clearly more than that.
It's clearly more than that.
And the AI agrees. 3 main areas, often intertwined.
Okay.
Economic instability, rising housing costs. I think a lot of people listening
Oh, for sure.
can relate to that these days.
Absolutely.
Wages are flat. Everything costs more. It's tough to make ends meet.
Yeah.
And when you're living paycheck to paycheck, one little thing goes wrong, medical bill, car breaks down,
You're done.
you're spiraling.
Yeah.
So it's not just bad choices, it's a system that's pushing people
Yeah.
to the edge. And then job loss, maybe your family falls apart, maybe you're fleeing domestic violence.
Right.
The AI calls this social support breakdown.
Makes sense.
That can really knock you down. The AI also calls out the narrative of they just didn't try hard enough.
Which is so harmful. It's easy to judge without knowing the whole story.
Absolutely. And then the third one, health issues. mental or physical, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Can really trap people in that cycle of homelessness. Imagine trying to hold down a job, find a place to live when you're dealing with chronic pain or an addiction.
Yeah, or a severe mental illness. It's like
Yeah.
impossible.
It's like you said, quicksand. The harder you fight, the deeper you sink.
Totally. It makes me think about another area where we oversimplify debt.
Oh, interesting.
Like Mike brings up, we're so quick to say, oh, they're just bad with money. But there's got to be more to it than that.
There is. The AI says, yeah, individual choices are part of it.
Okay.
But 3 big things are really at play here.
Okay.
First, the economic pressure we talked about, medical bills,
Oh, yeah.
student loans, everything's so expensive these days. So even if you're responsible, it can be really hard. And then, this is key, systemic inequality. That means basically the system's not fair for everyone.
Right.
Some people face way bigger barriers to being financially stable, like discriminatory lending, not having access to good education, or generational wealth gaps, when your family couldn't pass down any money or assets to help you get started.
It's like starting the race a mile behind everyone else.
Exactly. And then the third culprit, often forgotten, predatory lending.
Oh, yeah. What's that all about?
Companies or individuals that prey on people who are financially vulnerable, just trying to make a buck.
So give me an example. Like, how do they target people?
Think payday loans. Those short-term loans with insane interest rates, they often target people who are desperate. Or title loans, you use your car as collateral.
So you could use your car.
You could lose your only way to get to work.
Wow.
And it traps people in debt.
Yeah.
Really hard to get out of. So saying people in debt are just bad with money ignores this whole system.
Right. It's designed to keep people stuck.
Exactly. And we see this pattern again of focusing on the individual instead of the bigger picture when Mike brings up disability.
Okay.
He even asks the AI straight up, isn't the real issue how society treats disabled people?
That's a good point. It's not about fixing individuals. It's about fixing society.
Exactly. The AI lays out 3 big barriers. First one, lack of accessibility. I bet we've all experienced this, like a website that's impossible to use.
Oh, yeah.
Or a building with no ramp.
So many stairs. It's a nightmare.
Now imagine facing that every single day.
Yeah.
It's exhausting and it limits opportunities. And it makes you wonder, why are these barriers still here?
Right. The solution seems so obvious.
Right. Then we have barrier number 2, workplace discrimination. It's illegal, but it happens all the time. Qualified people get denied jobs because of their disability. Limits their income, their independence.
It's like not just about physical access.
No.
It's like attitudes need to change.
Exactly. And then all this leads to the third barrier, social isolation. Disabled people face these barriers so they can't participate as much.
Yeah.
It can be lonely.
Makes you feel alone.
Impacts mental health. It's a vicious cycle. Society creates barriers that leads to isolation, which pushes people further away.
Like they're trapped. And the AI's point is, it's not about fixing individuals.
Right.
It's about making society inclusive so everyone can thrive.
Exactly. It's a good reminder that it's not always about personal flaws, it's about the system.
And it shows up again when Mike talks about immigration.
Oh, another hot button topic.
Yeah, one that's fueled by fear and misconceptions a lot of the time. Like Mike mentions that fear can really cloud judgment, lead to oversimplification.
Absolutely. The AI brings up 3 things that get lost in the debate. 1, the economic contributions of immigrants, often overlooked. They often fill jobs others won't take. They pay taxes. They contribute to the economy.
Right.
But the narrative becomes they're taking our jobs or draining resources.
Which just isn't the whole picture.
No.
Yeah.
And then the idea of social integration. It's not about just assimilating, giving up your whole culture and adopting a new one.
Right.
It's about finding a balance, holding on to your heritage while being part of the larger society.
Yeah, it's a two-way street.
And the AI points out that fear of the unknown can lead to scapegoating.
Makes sense.
It's easier to blame outsiders for problems than to look at the real causes.
Right. It's like finding a simple target for our anxieties instead of facing the real issue.
Exactly. And this happens over and over again.
Throughout history.
Throughout history.
Yeah.
Important to remember. Okay, so we've got mental health, homelessness, debt, disability, immigration. Seems like we oversimplify a lot of things.
It's everywhere.
Everywhere.
To round out this part of our deep dive, let's look at unemployment.
Okay.
This is one where I've heard so many simple explanations.
Yeah.
People are just lazy. They don't want to work. We've all heard that.
Right. But like Mike, I think we know it's not that simple.
Not at all.
The AI breaks down 3 key factors that have nothing to do with laziness.
Okay, let's debunk these myths. I'm ready.
First, structural barriers.
Right.
Think discrimination based on race, gender, whatever. Limits opportunities. Or not having access to education and training.
You need the right skills.
Exactly. If you don't have the skills employers need, it's going to be hard to find a job. And then, geography. If you live in a place with few jobs, you're going to struggle.
No matter how hard you're looking.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's like you're playing a game where the rules are rigged against you.
Exactly. And then, second factor, economic shifts.
Okay.
The world's changing fast. Jobs disappear. New ones pop up.
So even if you have the skills and you're willing to work hard, the job you were trained for might just be gone.
Right. And this leads to our third factor, mismatched skills. Technology changes so fast, what you learn today might be useless tomorrow.
It's like you have to constantly be learning to stay relevant.
You do.
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure.
It is, especially for those facing other barriers. Limited education, discrimination, being in the wrong place. It's a lot to overcome.
So we've talked about a lot of issues where people reach for those easy answers.
We have.
But what's the harm?
Good question. It's one thing to say those simple explanations are wrong, but what are the consequences of believing them?
Yeah, what actually happens?
Well, that's a question Mike asks the AI. And the answer, it's not pretty, but we'll get into that in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, sounds intense. I'm ready for it.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Before we jump into the actual harm that oversimplification causes, let's do a quick recap.
Okay.
We've been looking at how this tendency to oversimplify, to just grab those easy answers, it impacts how we understand all these complex issues.
We've already touched on mental health, homelessness, debt, disabilities, immigration, and unemployment.
Phew, that's a lot.
It is a lot.
And it's kind of unsettling to realize how much we oversimplify.
Yeah, it can be. But I think it's in that unsettling feeling that real learning happens, you know?
I like that. It shakes us out of our comfort zone a little.
Exactly. Remember how before the break you asked about the consequences, like the real world impact of clinging to these simple narratives.
Yeah, it's one thing to say they're inaccurate, but what actually happens when we believe them?
Right. And the AI gives this warning about the false sense of control that oversimplification gives us.
Right. If we can pinpoint the cause, then we can control it.
Exactly. But that illusion of control, it comes at a price. The AI lays out 3 major costs, all linked together. First one, harmful stereotypes.
Okay.
We saw this with every single issue we talked about. Mental health, people are weak, lazy. Homelessness, irresponsible, they deserve it. Immigration, stereotypes about entire groups of people just based on where they're from. And those stereotypes, they don't just hurt feelings.
No.
They have real consequences.
They do. Prejudice, discrimination, people denied opportunities. It just keeps those who are already struggling even further down.
It's a cycle. Yeah. It's like the system is working against them.
Exactly. And the second cost, the AI says, is ineffective policies. If we get the problem wrong in the first place,
Right.
our solutions are going to be wrong too.
Like putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg.
Pretty much. Or trying to fix a leaky faucet by painting over the water stain.
Ooh, I like that analogy.
Right. It might look better for a second, but the problem's still there. The AI says we end up wasting time, money, effort on things that don't work.
And the real problems just get worse.
Exactly. And that brings us to, I think, the most dangerous cost.
Okay.
Loss of empathy.
You know, that makes sense. When I think about all the examples we've discussed, it's like oversimplification shuts down compassion.
It does. We cling to those simple stories, and it's easier to distance ourselves from other people's struggles.
We forget that anyone, given the wrong set of circumstances, could be in that position.
Exactly. We lose sight of that shared humanity. It becomes us versus them.
Yeah. Instead of recognizing that we're all in this together, we all deserve compassion, we need to support each other.
And when we lose that empathy, it becomes really hard to build a just and caring society.
Because if we don't understand each other's struggles, how can we actually address them? How can we create policies and systems that help everyone?
Exactly. Oversimplification leads to judgment and blame. Instead of understanding and compassion, it paints a pretty bleak picture, doesn't it?
It does. So does the AI offer any solutions? Like, how do we break free from this need for easy answers?
Well, thankfully, the AI does more than just point out the problem. It gives us a roadmap for deeper understanding. I think our listeners will appreciate this.
I'm all ears. What's the first step?
The AI says, seek out diverse perspectives. Get out of your echo chamber.
You mean like those comfortable spaces where everyone agrees with us?
Yeah, exactly. Intentionally expose yourself to different ways of thinking, even if it makes you a little uncomfortable.
That makes sense. If you're only ever exposed to one way of thinking, you start to believe it's the only truth.
Right. So the AI is saying, be more proactive. Follow people on social media who have different viewpoints.
Right.
Read books and articles from different sources. Get your news from outlets that represent a range of opinions.
Don't just let the algorithm decide what you see.
Right. Take control of your information diet.
I like that. And it goes beyond just reading, right? We have to actually talk to people who think differently than we do.
You got it. Those conversations can be tough, but they're so valuable. They force us to confront our own biases.
And question our assumptions. And like you said before, that discomfort, that's where we grow.
Exactly. Now, step 2 on this roadmap to understanding, listening to lived experiences.
Oh, that's powerful.
It is, because reading about an issue, it's not the same as hearing from someone who's actually lived through it.
Yeah, like a statistic versus a story.
Exactly. The AI is saying, find those opportunities to connect with people who have firsthand experience.
So like volunteering at an organization that helps people who are affected by an issue I care about.
Exactly. Or attending community events where you can hear people's stories, or even just starting a conversation with someone you wouldn't normally talk to.
Just be open, right? To learning from people who have different experiences.
And listen, really listen, with an open mind and a desire to understand.
Because empathy starts with understanding. I love that.
Okay, step 3, moving beyond individual action and looking at systemic change.
So the bigger picture. What are the systems that are creating these problems?
Right. We need to advocate for policies that address the root causes, not just the symptoms.
So like voting for candidates who support my values, contacting my elected officials, supporting organizations that are fighting for change.
Exactly. And remember, even small actions add up. Collective action is powerful.
Yeah, sometimes I forget that. It's easy to feel overwhelmed, like my one little voice doesn't matter.
It does matter. Change happens little by little.
Okay, so we've got diverse perspectives, lived experiences, and systemic change. What's the final step?
The AI reminds us to make empathy a core value.
Not just something we do sometimes, but like a guiding principle.
Exactly. Recognize that we're all connected, that individual struggles are often a reflection of bigger societal problems.
And respond with compassion, not judgment.
Yeah. Understand that everyone is doing their best with what they have.
And that we all have a part to play in making the world a better place.
Right. It starts with each of us choosing to see the world through that lens of empathy.
Wow. This AI has given us a lot to think about. Seeking diverse perspectives, listening to lived experiences, promoting systemic change, and fostering empathy. That's powerful stuff.
It is, and it takes work. It takes being intentional.
But it's worth it.
Definitely worth it. If we want to move beyond those simplistic narratives and really engage with the complexity of the world.
Which is what we're all about on the deep dive. So what's next? What are we exploring in part 3?
Welcome back to the deep dive. It's amazing how much we've unpacked already just about this human tendency to oversimplify things.
Yeah, we've gone from mental health to unemployment. And I think what's become so clear is that those easy explanations we reach for, they really fall apart when you look at the whole picture.
And what's interesting to me, this conversation between Mike and the AI, it doesn't just leave us feeling hopeless. It actually gives us some tools, some ways to move forward.
It reminds us that even though the world is messy and complicated, we can choose understanding instead of just grabbing those oversimplified explanations that feel good but aren't really true.
Exactly. And it all boils down to those 4 steps the AI laid out, right?
Right. Seek out diverse perspectives, listen to lived experiences, advocate for systemic change, and, make empathy a core value.
It's a lot. But if you had to pick one thing for our listeners to really take away from all this, what would it be?
That's tough. But I think you're right. It all starts with seeking out diverse perspectives. If all we're ever exposed to is information that confirms what we already believe, it's easy to get stuck in that echo chamber.
It's like we're only seeing one side of the story. And that's especially important these days with, algorithms and all that online. It's so easy to end up in these filter bubbles where we're only seeing information that reinforces our existing beliefs.
So how do we break free from that? What are some practical things our listeners can do?
Well, one thing I try to do is be more mindful about who I'm following on social media. Like, are all the voices I'm hearing saying the same thing?
Right. Are there perspectives missing?
Exactly. Make a conscious effort to follow people with different backgrounds, different professions, different political viewpoints. It can make a huge difference.
Yeah, instead of just passively scrolling, actually choose who you're listening to.
And it's not just social media. Seek out news sources that have different leanings. Challenge yourself to read opinion pieces that make you a little uncomfortable.
It's all about remembering that no one has a monopoly on truth,
Right.
right? We all have our biases, we all have blind spots. So we need to be exposed to a variety of ideas to get a more well-rounded understanding.
And beyond just reading or watching, I think those real aha moments happen when we actually talk to people who have different experiences than our own. Ask questions. Be curious.
Mm.
Really try to understand where they're coming from.
Yeah, those conversations, they can be challenging, especially when we're talking about sensitive issues. But I think you're right, that's where the real growth happens.
When we get out of our comfort zones and really listen to each other, and it's tempting to avoid those tough conversations. But if we want to break free from oversimplification, we have to embrace the complexity, right? The messiness of a world.
So to bring it back to our listener, what's the one thing we want them to remember from this deep dive?
Next time you hear a simple explanation for a complex problem, don't just accept it. Dig deeper. Ask yourself, what's missing from this story? What are the systemic factors at play? Whose voices aren't being heard?
It's about choosing curiosity over complacency, empathy over judgment.
Exactly. And remember, even small actions can make a difference. The world needs more people who are willing to embrace complexity, to challenge their assumptions, and to lead with empathy.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into oversimplification. We'll see you next time for another exploration of the forces shaping our world.